This picture from Pinterest is perfect for this tutorial, but first let's change it into black and white because it's much easier to see the value differences or the differences between the lighter and darker areas on a black and white photo. We begin with the basic cranium structure of a front-facing head. If you need a refresher course on the head structure, please refer to the video I have on the link. Do your best to draw the circle for the cranium, but it doesn't need to be perfect. However, we all have a bias for either the left or right side of the face, so I want to make sure that I draw both sides in equal lengths and widths. That's why I'm using my pencil as a guide to help me set the right width of both sides of the face. And now I'm using my pencil as a guide to set the three sections of the face that are about equal in length. Basically, they are from the hairline to the brow line to the bottom of the nose, and the bottom of the nose to the bottom of chin. It's a good idea to have these three sections memorized by heart. Remember also that the position of the mouth is from 1/3 to 1/2 of the distance from the bottom of the nose to the bottom of the chin. The two eyes are usually one eye apart. You should definitely take your time to use your pencil or a measuring stick to measure the approximate distance between the eyes, and not just the eyes, but also the important features of the face. Now I can draw in the top eyelids very softly. I start the nose bridge from close to the eye, and from the inner corners of the eye, I drop imaginary plumb lines to find the outer edges of the nose. The brow line is at half the length of the cranium. Check with the reference photo for the outer edges of the mouth, and softly indicate the top and bottom of the mouth. Softly draw in the construction lines because you will have to erase many of these lines later. For the jawline on each side of the face, I drop a line from the ear to slightly below the mouth and a second more slanted line to the chin, blocking the general shape of the neck and hair areas. Now that I have these facial features in place, I'm starting to remove most of the construction lines. For the nose, I simply indicate the bottom of the nose, the nostril areas, and the wings of the nose. I do the same for the eyes. The eyes are usually softer than you think, so I try not to draw them too dark because chances are I will be making adjustments, exactly what I'm doing right now. At this stage, you should still constantly look at your reference photo and look at your drawing and see if there's any more changes you need to make. I usually pay extra attention to the eyes and the nose because they are at the center of the face, so their positions and sizes can change the positions of other facial features. I always start the nose bridge from the inside corners of the eyebrows and work my way down. I constantly look at the reference photo and make adjustments to my drawing until I feel satisfied with the position and the shape of the nose. I do the same with the lips now. Although it looks like there's a lip line around the mouth, I actually did not use very much pressure. I'm simply using these lines to indicate the shape of the mouth and will erase them later. And yes, I just redrew the nose again. I want to capture the particular look of the nose bridge and the tip of the nose. I'm adjusting and strengthening the hairline to the forehead area and the jawlines. I look at the reference photo, make my adjustment, look at the reference photo again and make more adjustments. You probably have noticed by now that the face I am drawing looks quite different from that on the reference photo. And that's okay because my purpose is not to draw a perfectly identical face. My purpose is to help you see my drawing process, especially how I constantly make adjustments, drawing, redrawing, building, tearing down, and building again. I don't have to be a slave to what's already on the paper. And I can make adjustments whenever I see something different. This is especially important when I'm building the framework for my drawing. When I'm happy with my framework, I start blocking in the darkest values. In this case, it's the hair. Looking at my reference photo, I can see that the hair is much darker than the skin tone. After the hair, which areas on the skin is the darkest in the skin tone? They're in the eye socket under the eyebrows, under the nose, under the upper lip, under the lower lip, and under the chin. These are true on the photo and under most normal light conditions. These areas are dark because of both cast and form shadows. A large part of the neck area under the chin is especially dark because of the shadows. Some are from the shadows cast by the chin and the jaws. Some are from the direction of the neck that turns away from the light. So I'm drawing back in the eye area. Under the upper and lower lid, there will also be some shadows. And there are more shadows to the right side, our side, on the face, because the light is coming from the top and slightly to the left of us. I'm shading the dark areas rather lightly, although it's hard to tell from this video. So before I start shading, and even as I shade, I am constantly checking the values against the reference photo. Are the shadows on the right side of the nose bridge darker or lighter than the shadows on the left? Are they darker or lighter than the shadows under the nose and under the lower lid? You want to constantly ask these kinds of questions in your head as you're blocking these darker or medium dark areas. This way you can get the correct value relationships between the light, medium, and really dark areas. I started from blocking the darkest area, which is the hair, and moved on to the next darkest area on the face and neck. Now I've covered areas of the face that barely has any shadow. So basically, I've shaded from the darkest to the lightest areas. And this is a good general rule to follow when you're using graphite or charcoal pencils. If you go with the other way around, which means going from the lighter to the darker values, you will start noticing that your drawing will get darker and darker. At some point, you will run out of the darkest darks. At this point, I'm still working on the overall value relationship between the shadow areas, especially the 5 main shadow areas. So just in case that you haven't noticed, this video is sped up from the original speed by at least 2 to 3 times. So I normally don't draw this fast, and you shouldn't either. Trying to draw this fast could possibly result in some sort of injury. Feel free to slow down this video or pause and go back to the sections you want to rewatch. If you have enjoyed this video so far, please click on the like or thumbs up button. Your support means that I can push more of these videos out in the future. And please leave your comments or suggestions in the comments section below. Thank you for your support. I'm indicating lightly the shadow areas of the ears. The ears are usually not the main character in a portrait or drawing, but they will look completely out of place if you don't make some kind of indications of shadow. I spend more time on the eyes making sure the shapes, the forms, and the shadows are correct because they play a more important role in the expressions of the person. I'm leaving the irises untouched for now because I want to make sure that I keep the highlights, the very brightest part of this portrait alive. I just switched to my mechanical pencil with a 4B lead so I can get the darkest part of the hair and so I can achieve the contrast in values that is necessary for this drawing to pop. If you don't have a 4B graphite pencil, you can use the pencil you have but with a lot more pressure. Please excuse the sudden transition here. I forgot to push the record button when I was shading this part of the neck and shirt. But you can see that I have filled out most of the hair using strokes or drawing in the direction of the growth of the hair. applying a lot more pressure in the darkest areas of the hair and using less pressure in the lighter areas. Check with the reference photo for the lighter and darkest areas. You should not try to draw every strand of hair on the head. A good rule of thumb is to draw the hair in clumps and indicate the areas of your lighter or darker values with your shading. As for the outer edges of the hair, you want to draw them very lightly. And don't draw the outer edges of the hair with a dark outline, because you don't want the head to look like a cutout on a piece of paper. I usually draw the outer edges of the hair with broken or very soft lines. I'm back at the center of the face, which is where I want my viewers to focus on. A short line to indicate the tear duct area, and the very dark values at the end of the eye to our right. And I darken the white of the eye ever so slightly with my 1B pencil, darkening the shadow areas under the lash line. And I also draw in the shadow between the upper eyelid and the crease of each eye. There's also a bit of shadow at the outer corner of the left eye. And again, starting from the center of the face, the eyebrow area, I work on the nose bridge, putting in another layer of darker values. I block in the brightest spots on the irises before I shade in them. I darken the outer edges of the irises, parts of the irises under the upper lid, and also the pupils in the irises. I also made the creases above the upper eyelids darker. From the reference photo, the right eye socket is darker than the left eye socket, so I'm increasing the values of different parts of that eye. The right temple also gets an increase in value. Okay, I'm working on increasing the values on the skin tones, but also the different planes of the face. There's some form shadow above the upper lip where the plane of the face changes its direction, and also form shadows on the nose bridge itself. The area below the eyebrows in the eye socket should really be darker in value than the area above the eyebrow. Okay, I'm just building on the framework that I set up in the earlier parts of this video, checking back and forth between my reference photo and my drawing, keeping my lightest lights in the skin tones, and building on the medium tones and the darker tones and the darkest values. This sketch is relatively small, no more than 3 inches in height. I typically spend about 1 to 2 hours on a portrait this size. Of the 1 to 2 hours, I usually spend the majority of the time in getting the proportions right from the beginning, which I learned very recently is the one thing that master portrait artists do. At an online pastel conference I attended, portrait artist William Schneider walked the students through the long process of getting the facial proportions right from a reference photo and apologized for not spending enough time on that process. He explained that of all the time he spends on a painting, he usually spends half of the time in getting the underdrawing correct. I used to feel bad about how long it takes me to finish a good drawing, and I was shocked to hear that even a master portrait artist like William Schneider does the exact same thing. So now I don't feel bad about spending so much time to get my facial structures correct first. It may not be the most interesting or fun part of the drawing process, but it should be a priority in your practice for drawing faces. And practicing how to get the facial proportions right is the best thing you can do to improve your skills for drawing people. I suggest that you do a lot of practice. You can use pictures from a magazine or from Pinterest like what I'm doing right now, or even better, draw with a live model. Every drawing I draw right now is really a result of all the hundreds and perhaps thousands of faces I've drawn before. And it's a good idea to see every drawing as a practice. And every drawing that I practice right now will inform me and make my next drawing better. Hey, we're in the final stages of this drawing process. This means I'm mostly satisfied with the values that I have achieved with my shading. So I'm adding some details to make this drawing better. When the light comes from the top, the upper lip is usually darker than the lower lip. The darkest area is usually the line between the lips, but I don't draw the line as a flat line, but I use shorter lines to indicate the curves that's between the upper and lower lips. And I don't want to draw an outline around the lips. So I shade the lips with just enough pressure to show a distinction between the lip and the skin area. I'm using my 4B mechanical pencil to shade in the darkest shadow areas on the face and neck. At the same time, I'm making sure that the shadow areas on the face are not darker than the darkest areas of this drawing, which is the hair. So I'm darkening the darkest areas of this portrait, and they include this dark shirt, or rather the indication of a shirt. I take care not to draw the things that are far away from the center of the face too clearly, even as I shade in the darkest areas to increase my value contrast. I know this by squinting my eyes when I look at the reference photo. When you squint your eyes, it helps you see the biggest differences in the darkest and the lightest areas, because it's much harder to see the differences in values, basically the darks and the light areas, when you're looking at a colored photo. This is why I changed the original reference photo into a monotone black and white photo. I suggest you do the same to any reference photos you're using. With modern technologies, you can easily convert a colored photo into a black and white one using some of the apps on your computer or on your phone. I'm just adding some finishing touches to this drawing, and I could take even more time to refine the details or even go back to change some of the stuff that I don't like. But I've already achieved the two main goals I have for this drawing process. Basically, they are getting the head and facial proportions correct and using shading techniques to achieve the value contrast I want to make this portrait look realistic. Please click the thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel if you wish to see more tutorials like this. Thank you so much for your support, and happy drawing!